Hello my creative friends, it's time to take another art break, and today I'm ending up the Baby Animal Farm series with this sweet little colt out in the pasture. The series began with this cute little cow that was out in the barn in the background, and then it had the little grouping of piglets that were splashing around in a mud puddle. Now all three of these series definitely have a whimsical folk art style vibe to them, and if you would like to paint along with me, but drawing's not your thing, I have a sketchbook membership. That's where I have all of the tracers for any of the paintings that I do on my YouTube channel, so that you can simply just trace and then paint right along with me. It's very reasonably priced, easy to join, and I appreciate all those who have joined and support my channel that way. Thank you so much. Well, let's get started and we'll continue on with the last of this series with this sweet little colt out in the pasture. Within this series, I've also given a series of drawing ideas of how you could possibly draw the animals yourself. The colt was the most difficult animal for me to get the proportions right. I ended up drawing a grid pattern that just helps me figure out the sizes that I wanted to draw. I'm first going to start out with the body, and I'm making that more of a rectangle shape. It's going to have rounded ends though, because it's an animal, so it's going to be rounded. But I first started with that shape for the body part. Then when I placed my head on, I made it more of rather an egg shape, but not too narrow for the nose, because the horse's muzzle is a little wider, but it's kind of that general shape. An elongated egg shape is how I made the head. It's going to be sitting on the top of that rectangle shape I just made, so it looks like my head and my body is connected. The next area I'm going to concentrate are on the legs. The legs are kind of important. They are very long. When you look at a baby colt, they look like they're all legs with these little kind of short ears at the top, but you do want to have these longer style legs. Now I'm just showing you a very simple form of how to kind of set up your horse. I spent a lot of time on drawing the legs and getting the proportions right. They have kind of those big knobby knees on your horse and a little bit longer part, and their hooves have a different type of shape as well. They're not cleft, meaning they don't have 2 points on them. They're just a rounded hoof line. So there was a lot of little extra details when drawing the legs and the foot that I had to look at a real colt image to figure out how to draw them. Now for the neck, to make it attach a little bit more, I'm going to curve up and connect my head and make that back area of the rumpus area, or the back part, to have a little bit more rounded hip. And here I'm working on the nose and coming down and squaring off just a little bit at the bottom where the muzzle is. Now the horses have a little bit taller ear, but not too tall. If you get it to be too tall of an ear, it's going to look like it's a little mule, which is absolutely sweet. So you kind of want to make sure that you take a look at your ears and they're not going to be too long. The eyes of the horse are set off to the far sides of the head, so that's going to help it look more like a horse as well. And the little nostrils on each side of the nose, those are more of comma strokes, and that's going to help set it up to look like it has that nostrils in the muzzle area of the horse. Now the legs, when I was drawing those, I wanted to have some of the legs look like they were behind and in front of each other. So that back leg, it's going to come a little bit wider, and then it's going to go up into that hip area and erasing that one area that's in front there of my rectangle. That's going to make it look like that leg is in front, and then by drawing the other one that only goes up to the belly, that will look like it's in the back. And those front legs, I just made them more look like they were together. This is very much a folk art style, whimsical style drawing, so I wasn't going for exact. And these are basically just some simple shapes of how you can break down the look to get them to look like the elements look more like a horse. Even if you don't have them perfect, if you have those longer legs, that simple little head shape, and the shorter body with because it being a colt, it's going to look like a horse. And then you can add on just a little tail, a tiny bit of mane at the top, and you will only see just a little bit of the mane off to the side. And that's it. You can basically draw your colt that way if you'd like to try. Otherwise, you can always check out my sketchbook membership and get the tracer, and then you can paint right along with me. Well, let's move right on into the watercolor steps of how I painted this painting. As always, I like to do a color chart of some of the colors I'm going to be using for my watercolor, because watercolor doesn't have a lot of ways you can change it once you start. So if you're going to do a watercolor, it's a great idea just to do a color swatch and get an idea of the direction that you want to go with your painting. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to start with the sky, and I'm going to be using some clean water. Now this particular paper is the Canson watercolor paper. It's a student grade, it's 140 pound, but it has a cellulose that is mixed into the paper instead of being cotton. So what that means is I'm not gonna get as much open time. My colors might be a little harder to get to blend because the water is gonna sit really kind of on top of this paper. It's not going to go all the way down. So I'm gonna get a little bit of blending happening. I can still get that, but I might have to work a little harder, move a little faster, because I'm not gonna have as much open time. And I'm gonna start with the blue sky. We've been doing some folk art style skies in this series where we have been doing some whimsical sunshine, like either sunsets or sunrises. This one's got kind of more of a little stylized sky going on. But the one thing, because it has these oranges and yellows here for my sun, I'm going to want to make sure that my blues are going from dark into light, because I don't want a lot of blue next to my sunshine. Now when you're doing this, you're going to want to get off to the side of your paper. Take a look. That's where you're going to be able to see where perhaps you have some skips of where your water isn't going, and that will affect how the color will go on. I'm not looking for standing puddles, but I want just a nice glisten on the back of my paper to help me with my color blends. All right, I think I've got that started. Let's go ahead and start with my lightest shade of blue, and I'm going to put that on. My skies will go from dark to light. So as they head down towards the horizon line, they're going to go a little lighter. So I'm just going to rub this on. And I'm going to be lighter here. I don't want as much blue there because that's going to be a little bit yellow. So now I'm going to go a little bit lighter down there. Choose a little bit. I like having a little darker onto the edges. I'm pretty close to the end here with my sunshine details, but I'm going to try to keep it a little bit lighter. And go light here, and especially because I have all of that. Now what I can do is I can come in and rinse my brush out, give it a squeeze, and then just tap or blend or push my colors more towards this area without adding any more color. And because it's got a little cellulose and not as much cotton in there, this might be a better way to push my color. So I'm going to be pushing and pulling and working my color that way, and not relying so much on my water and my paper blending my color for me. So I can still get a pretty look. I'm just going to have to work it a little bit more. I'm going to pick up just a slight bit darker shade of blue, and let's add that to maybe some of the top areas here. Now I have a little less water on my paper because I've already worked it. Now I'm going to come in with just a little bit of clean water and blend my colors out. If you get a little bit too much water, you're going to notice these little ripples of color. Just forgot the word of them. Words are hard sometimes. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of a sky or a cloud treatment. This time I'm going to use my paper towel because that's what I have in my hand, but I do like using like a bathroom tissue to do this technique with the best. I'm going to wrinkle it up, get some texture going here, but then I'm going to let it unwind just a tiny bit so I can get a little bit of this cloud, and I'm going to tap it in and see if I can't get a little bit of a cloud action going. Yeah, that looks pretty. Let's pick up some here as well. Okay, and again, I'm going to call that good and stop. There's a temptation to keep on going a little bit farther than I should, but I'm going to stop. I'm going to check this area here. I'm going to see if I can't pull some of this, lift some of that blue out of there, because I know it's going to be yellow or orange, and I really don't want a lot of that blue there. I'm going to lift some of it here as well. See if I can't soften that area just a little bit more, so I don't have so much green in my sunshine area. Okay, let's stop. Not do any more. Maybe just a little bit here too. Okay, now let's stop. We're gonna need to let that dry. So I'm going to be choosing an area. I'm gonna bump down and work on an area that doesn't touch my blue sky at all, because the watercolor is gonna wanna go wherever the paper is wet. So I wanna move down and work in an area that doesn't touch that. And let's go ahead and work a little bit on this foreground and some of these flowers. I'm gonna get playful with these colors because they are just fun flowers. They're not real flowers. So I'm just gonna have a little fun with this. I'm gonna speed this up as you watch me paint these little fun flowers. Another reason I decided to choose to work on the flowers first before I did the background of any of the grasses around it is that often when I'm doing the green, doing the backgrounds, I sometimes tend to overpaint and I don't leave enough room for my flower shapes underneath, and I definitely need white underneath those flowers to get those colors to pop, those bright colors I'm looking for. If I end up putting all the green on and I don't have enough room and I haven't left enough room for my petals, I find that the petals end up being rather squishy and not enough shape. So this way, by doing the flowers first, before I put the green background on, I'm making sure I have larger, fuller flower shapes. Now I'm going to be starting to work a little bit more on the background, and I'm going to be starting with that first rolling hill in the background and tapping in a little bit of green for my trees as well. Normally when you do landscapes, you start with the lightest shade of green in the background, and then as your colors come forward, you're going to be more dark and have more details. Another great tip is when you're doing the grass and the land and the rolling hills is to apply your paint in a horizontal manner. That way you're going to get a better feeling of that it's more of grass and hills that are rolling if you put your paint on that way. Not every area can you, but if you can, it just really does help to have those longer strokes of paint going horizontally on your painting. Once I had finished doing the green layers on, I let my painting dry completely. This is a great way to check to see how much your paint is going to lighten as it dries. Watercolor always dries a little bit lighter, so what you see when it's wet won't look that way when it's dry. And this is where you can add in a few more shadows and add those on your hills and then bring up the detail as you're coming to the foreground of your painting. I always mix my colors too as I'm going, so I have about 3 different shades of green that I'm using, and I kind of just mix them off to the side. I'm using still about the same consistency of either tea or coffee. I'm not adding a lot more pigment to my paint, I'm just adding another layer. Usually with watercolor, I usually at least add 2 layers of color, if not 3. With watercolor, it's a complete different process than what acrylic paint is. With acrylic paint, you always add your darkest colors and then add your light ones on top. With watercolor, you add your lightest colors first and then you paint the shadows. So it's always a great idea to go light and then layer on slowly. Take your time when you're adding those next layers. Now let's work a little bit on that sunshine. I'm first going to be laying in just clear water and then topping in some yellow and some oranges to create that sunshine glow. All 3 paintings have different barns on them, and this one has a little extra special barn. It's a round barn, and I'm going to be using more of a white feeling for this barn. So I'm going to be adding some darker shadows on using some Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is kind of like almost a darker navy color, and that's what I'm going to be using to tap in a few of the cooler shadows on this barn. And while those cool shadows are still wet, I'm picking up just a little bit of my charcoal black in my set, which has a slightly bit warmer tone to it. And I'm going to be tapping in a little bit of a warmer shade of gray to add just a little bit darker shade of the gray color to add the shadows as well. And keeping in mind that this color is going to fade quite a lot while it dries, so it's not going to look as dark as this once my color is dry. Now that all the greens have completely dried, I'm going to start painting the Colt in this painting. I'm just mixing up a variety of rusty browns and a little bit of burnt umber to begin the process of painting. There's some shadow areas on the Colt that I really want to keep in mind. I want to make sure that that back leg is going to look darker, so in the painting process, I'll be laying on the lightest colors, but then going back in and making sure I'm adding a darker tone of either the rusty brown or mixing in a little bit of burnt umber to create those little shadow lines in that back leg around the area of where the flowers are. I want to make sure it looks a little darker there, so it looks like those flowers are kind of popping off away from my horse. So I'm going to start layering in the colors this way. Because this paper does have a lot of cellulose in it and it does dry fairly quickly, I'm going to be working on sections. So I'm going to be doing the back part of my horse first and some of the leg area, working on those areas, and then I'm going to move up on my horse. So I can section it off, and that'll just really help me be able to blend my colors a little softer by working this way. I left the face area as the very last area on the Colt that I was going to paint. I want this to be feeling a little lighter than what the body is. That's just going to help it feel like it's in front of the body. So I'm going to be adding some darker colors inside of the ears to give those a little dimension. And then I'm going to be making that muzzle a little slightly darker than the rest of its face. I also wanted to include more of a white blaze down the front of the face of the horse. So I'm going to be leaving it mostly white paper, but then coming in and just adding just a tiniest bit of color in there as well. For a little bit more control of color, I was going to be using a micron pen to do the eyes and the nostrils of the horse. Now for those hoofs down below, I wanted to make those darker than the body, so I'm using more of a burnt umber color there. I'm using a little bit of that burnt umber on the mane as well, and just washing a tiny bit of it on the muzzle. All these little tiny details and washes of color will help make this little horse look like it's very much a 3D animal. Now let's go ahead and work a little bit more on that background for the barn. As you can see, those colors really have dried a lot lighter than what they were when they were wet, and I'm just adding a few more details using the same colors as I did before. I'm going to be using a micron pen to add a few details to that barn in the background. I'm not worried about painting my doors or my windows precisely. I'm just putting my colors in, and I'll be adding the little details in the end using my pen. For the floral wreath around the Colt, I just used some of the paint that I had in my palette. I had some leftover pinks from those little pigs I had done, so I decided I would use some of the pinks and a little bit of yellows, and I'm just tapping my paint wet on wet and letting those colors mix together and giving it that flower feel. At this stage, I'm pretty much done with the watercolor. I'm just going to double check to see if I need to darken any areas or add a little bit more color as a final check, and then I'm going to let it all dry and move right into the pen work. For this painting, I was going to be using the micron pen in the nib size 01 to add my details. This is what I was going to be coloring in the eyes with, adding the little nostrils, and then just adding just the tiniest bit of detail around my horse. I wasn't going to be looking for like a color book style where everything is outlined. I'm adding more sketch, kind of a hand quality of drawn look to this by using irregular stop and start lines for my painting. That's one of my favorite ways to add line work with the micron pen and that very much that hand sketched look. For the final details, I'm going to be using some colored pencils, and I love using the Premier pencils to do this with. I do have some links down in the description box of some of the items I use to create my paintings. This is a Canson brand paper. It's 140 pound. It does have a smoother surface for it. It's not as bumpy as some other papers, and it works perfectly to add these color pencil details on top of. Well, I'm almost finished. Let's go ahead and take the tape off, and I'm going to put it in a frame, and let's see what it looks like with the other paintings in this series. And here they are, looking cute as can be. This whimsical folk art style series of baby farm animals has been so fun to create. I just love their little expressions on their face, those whimsical backgrounds, and those fun little bits of sunshine. And all the barns have their own little character. Well, if you love doing whimsical art and you enjoy doing this style, come on over to my channel and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It really does help YouTube push my videos out there. Well, thanks for joining me today, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again. And perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.